Welcome back to another episode of Bossy, Brilliant, and Badass, this time on video. I'm Lisa Lindsay, and I'm here with my entrepreneurial co-host, Liz Green. Hey, Liz.
Hey, Lisa. Hi, everybody. Oh my gosh, I was so nervous about this episode, Lisa, because I thought we've been doing all audio, and wait, now we're going to be on video, and I haven't done my Botox. I haven't had my hair professionally colored. What's going to happen? And you said, or I said, I can't remember who said that, just rip off the Band-Aid. Let's do it. Let's do our first episode for YouTube. So here we are, ripping off the Band-Aid.
Here we are. Now, we might be saying this on the podcast, and you might go look for a YouTube video, and there might be none, because I may decide to scrap it. Because if I don't like my grays, it's out.
Right, exactly. Or yeah, if we're hypercritical of ourselves, you won't be finding it on YouTube.
Yeah, you're going to be
right
like,
now.
What are they saying? There's a YouTube video? I don't see it. Yeah, because I killed it.
But yeah, I mean, it's great because I know that you and I have talked about this for a while, and especially since we have some really exciting guests coming up. We've had so many exciting guests, but the ones coming up, a couple of them I'm particularly excited about. And we just thought, it's about time that we just do it this way. So I think it's good. I feel comfortable. How do you feel? I'm
feeling good. I'm generally feeling okay. I'm not a big fan of camera and being on camera just in general anyway, but video is the way of the world. So let's do it.
Do it. Gotta do
Let's do it.
So what are we going to talk about today? I mean, I know we've kind of bounced a few things back and forth, but what are we going to talk about mostly?
So I was thinking that we could talk a little bit about entrepreneurship, just more generally, because one of the things I noticed is that we've been talking about entrepreneurship, and we've kind of crafted our season around entrepreneurship, but we probably never really defined it. And I think there's some questions I have about how you approach your entrepreneurship and your entrepreneurship life, right? The things you do. Plus, so I'm curious about how you handle those, and I'm happy to share my experiences. You always get me with those questions to the side.
Those unexpected questions.
I know, right? So I have some questions for you. And I think you have some questions for me. And, we've also had a really great run of guests, which, they've told us some very interesting things. So I'm also curious to get your take on some of the things that they've said, because, while we're in the interview, we share things, but we don't always sort of go, oh, hey, what do you think about that? So I'd love to kind of do retrospective, let's call it, and see kind of where your head is in terms of some of the things that they've shared with us.
Absolutely. Yeah, I would love to. And I'm curious too of, how your takeaways from some of our guests and because you're right, we don't really talk about it afterwards, but I know for myself, I have implemented so many strategies into my own businesses, and it's just phenomenal. I just feel like I'm forever learning more and more and more with these fantastic guests. I feel so grateful.
Yeah, I think they're great. And I mean, I think it's so interesting because it fills in with the mission of our podcast as well. Because one of the things we say up front is that we're on this learning journey too, right? And we don't know everything. So while we're here and we're talking to you guys and we're talking about entrepreneurship, we're learning things too. There are things we're not doing right today, and we're learning. So we're happy to teach and educate you. But our guests educate us as well, and helps us to improve the way we're doing things. So I'm really excited. All right. So where do you want to start, Miss Liz? By the way, did I ever Miss Liz is the name of my grandmother. Did I just said that and realized? Yes. I never told you that. Yeah.
No.
So I have maybe 6 or 7 Elizabeths in my life.
You're kidding me.
No joke.
Wow.
Just a little tidbit. Yeah. And by the way, Lisa is derived from Elizabeth as well. So there you go.
Is it really? I know Betty. Betty. My nana's name is Betty. Never really liked that name. Bess.
Yeah.
And there's a few others. I didn't know Lisa was.
Lisa is, I think it's Jewish. Like a Jewish derivative. Jewish. Yeah. Derivative, but yeah, it's derived from, and I have a few. I have a couple of Beths. I have Elizabeth.
Interesting. Wow. Who knew, right?
Who knew? I knew.
Um,
All
who
right,
knew?
let's
And
get.
you usually do know most things, I have to say. Whenever whenever I'm confused about something, I just go, okay, Lisa knows the answer to that. Or Lisa will know that.
You
Or
know
let me
what?
just find out from Lisa.
It's only because I read a lot. That's it. That's the only reason.
All right. So, how about we start with some of our favorite episodes?
Yeah, sure. So yeah, we've had a great run of guests and they've talked a lot. Like, what are some of the things that kind of resonated? Who jumps out for you as like your favorite?
I have a few favorites for different reasons.
Yeah,
One of my very favorite episodes was with Matt Mize, and he
yeah.
talks about digital strategies. And I just came away from that conversation really enlightened. I learned so much about digital marketing, and I learned about how to market digitally over COVID and
Hmm.
finding of the heart of your business and the heart of the story
Yeah.
where people can really resonate. And to tell you the truth, I hadn't really thought about it all that much before in that way because my main business, Bar Candy, is more product based. So I was mostly thinking about, oh, I want my customers to really love, say, this new flavor I'm coming out. And oh, wow, they're going to love this particular shape. And maybe I'll come up with a couple of especially cocktails for them. But to find out that you really need to look at the heart of your story and what resonates with people. It really changed my marketing strategy, especially over COVID.
Yeah, I liked a lot of the things that Matt had to say as well. I tend to be a little bit more practical in a sense. So all the stuff he was talking about the heart of the story and the why, and really kind of getting into your brand a bit. I loved all that stuff. It was such a great conversation. As a matter of fact, it was one of our longer episodes. It's really good. I kind of dug into like some of the things that he was saying about how we have to kind of go outside convention a little bit as well when we're marketing
Right.
and really think differently about how you use digital and not forgetting the traditional marketing as well. Because he said something
Right.
about using radio ads, and I'm sitting there like, what? Like, I'm a
Mm-hmm.
little HR consulting business. How could I use a radio ad to
Mm-hmm.
help move my business along? But it really is no different to podcasting. It's
Right.
going out live instead of being packaged up and put out on demand. So I thought that stuff was interesting as well. And then he talked a little bit about how we could even use this medium of podcasting to do very different things
Mm-hmm.
as well. Maybe a capsule podcast, which is something I am still very much thinking about how I implement in my consulting business.
Right.
How I craft it. And I've been kind of really kind of planning. And the great thing about something like that is I can just do it when it's ready, I can push it out into the world. I don't have to do it the same way we do this podcast. So it's really cool. He was
Absolutely.
really great. And I liked him as well.
Yeah, and Ashley Mason,
Oh
who
yeah.
has a company called The Dash of Social, she had so many great things to say as well, in a different way, right? She was
Mm-hmm.
talking about using some Facebook strategies, like starting a Facebook group or joining a Facebook group. And she also talked about, that you don't really have to be on all the social media platforms, and you can kind of just start small and find where your audience lives.
Yes.
And when I first started, I thought, oh, I have to be on I have to be on LinkedIn, I have to be on Instagram, all of them. And then I realized, well, of course every business is different.
Mm-hmm.
And so she has very different things to say than Matt. And I learned a tremendous amount from her as well.
Yeah, and I like the idea of using groups to build up your thought leadership, right?
Yeah.
I loved what she said about that. So I kind of even translated it because LinkedIn has groups as well, and so does Google. Google have Google
Right.
groups. They're not as popular as Facebook groups. I would say LinkedIn groups and Facebook groups are probably about similar popularity. But the idea of using those to build up your thought leadership. So it is very easy. I love that because it's very easy for me to answer a question than it is for me to put new thoughts out into the world, right? So,
Right.
meaning, and what I mean by that is it's harder for me to create a blog post, right? Like I don't know, right? Like, all right, fine.
It's so tough.
I gotta organize my thoughts. I gotta have them
Mm-hmm.
flowing. But if you ask me a question, I can keep going. I can talk to you. I have stuff that comes up. Sometimes I'm thinking I need to walk around with a recorder so I can capture what I've said.
Oh, your brilliance.
Thank you. But so I can capture what I've said so that I can write it down later, right? Because I say so many interesting things and I can answer a question, but I can't write it down. But if I'm doing that in groups, I have the ability to build up my expertise, which I think is really interesting and really exciting. And the other thing I loved, right, is her talking about how groups can help us with community. Because I don't know about you, I don't have I mean, I have a few friends who are entrepreneurs as well. And then there's, of course, we chat a lot, and other coaches I know and things like that. But really having like a larger community of people you're talking to, networking with, that kind of thing. The idea of using groups to do that is so cool to me. And
It
just
is
a different
cool.
way of me thinking about it, that you're just kind of here hanging out with these people and building these relationships in a very
Well, yeah,
different way.
because we all know entrepreneurship is lonely.
Very.
It's lonely. It's, you know, you're not going usually, I mean, especially now, you're not going to an office every day.
Mm-hmm.
You're not in a social circle every day. So to
Mm-hmm.
have these groups is vitally important. And,
Yeah.
you know, for being an entrepreneur, you have to keep yourself inspired, which
Mm-hmm.
is why I liked Lauren LaPointe's episode as well,
Yes.
how to keep your business inspired. And it's hard when you're an entrepreneur and you're a solopreneur.
Yeah, it really is. And the other thing that I would say to that, especially about Lauren's episode, is that I find that my score mentorship, actually, I see that a lot with my score clients, them having the loneliness
Oh,
and
really?
the
Yeah.
loneliness, but also not sometimes saying to me, I don't even know why I'm doing this, why I'm still doing this, right? Like, what am I doing? I don't, just being so bogged down, especially these days with everything that's going on in the world, between COVID and freaking fires and racial justice issues and just all that stuff, which is really, really hard depending on who you are. Every one of those things affect you very differently. And the truth is, you have to get up and figure out how to show up every day and still get work done for your clients and serve your customers as well. And you've got all this still going on in your head and you don't know how to deal with it, right? How do you deal with it? So, and then sometimes if it's hard, you're not getting any business because businesses slow down. And then you're like, why? Why am I doing this? Why?
Yeah.
Am I stupid? Should I go get a job?
Right.
Right.
And that's something, you know, I've asked myself over the years
Oh my God.
a number of times, like, should I just throw in the towel and just go and get a corporate job? And I'm so experienced in nightlife and running clubs
Hospitality, yeah.
and hospitality. You know, I could easily become a director of operations and make a couple $100,000 a year for a big company. But you know what? I would not be following my dream. And
I
in
wouldn't be
20 years,
fulfilled.
I would not be fulfilled. And I would turn around and say, that was awful. That was not a good use of my life.
Yeah. I totally agree with you. So I liked Lauren's episode where it dropped in for just a little bit of inspiration about how we kind of keep ourselves going when things get tough. And it was great because it was very practical things. It was literally go for a walk at sunset, right?
Yeah.
Which is not hard for any of us to do, whatever that looks like. So for me, it's going up to my roof because I don't have a backyard where I am. But it literally is just something that simple where you're just kind of reconnecting to yourself and reconnecting to the why of your business. so that you have something to hold on to when it gets tough. So I love that.
Yeah, yeah, me too. And I think that one of my very favorite episodes was with my mentor, Louise Lippman.
Yeah.
And she talks about in the episode how to protect your mental health, especially over COVID and over these crazy times that we're all going through. We're all going through something. Doesn't matter who you are, how successful your business is, we're all going through a lot of stuff. And so she really had so much to say around that very subject. And I think that, you know, to keep yourself inspired is one thing, and you can go and, you know, make sure you see the sunset every day and whatever it takes, but also to really kind of know what is triggering you and what's coming up is vitally important too, because otherwise we might just sit there and put the covers over our head and just say like, I'm
not coming out for the world today. I'm not coming out to the world today.
Right.
And you know what? I actually think that that's okay, right? Like there are going to be days. I know in the past, you know, we haven't talked about this much on the podcast because we tend to keep it light and plus our recording schedule, but we never talked about how this police brutality stuff, right? Like it really was, there were days where it was just really hard to see some of those things, to hear some of those things, to process it, and to process it in context of my corporate experience, right? Because my entrepreneurship experience is a little bit different. My corporate experience was really rough when it came to this stuff, like happened all the time. And then to have empathy for other people and to understand what other people were going through as well and what this looked like. And so it was really hard. And it was always finding a way to, how do we push through that? Right? Yeah. And that's a very real thing, a very real part of the entrepreneurship life, just being able to sort of push past the stuff that's happening in the world that's impacting us, everybody, in a very different way. It's like we talked about it with Louise, just high trauma, like everybody is being traumatized right now. And we're 6 months into COVID. We're 4 months into the recent spate of police brutality and protests in the country. We're 1 month into wildfires out in California. I mean, it's a lot. It's a lot. And then we have an election that's coming up, which is, everybody believes that is high stakes and will change the nature of our country. It's a lot. It's a lot. And it impacts our world and our everyday and our ability to get our work done, our ability to serve our clients well and effectively. So taking care of our mental health, and also I would say go deeper and say, taking care of ourselves, whatever that looks like, even if
it looks like,
I'm not coming out today. Right? And shutting it down and taking a day off to take care of yourselves and do a thing that fills you up is going to be really important. So I love it.
Yeah, I agree. It's about your self-care. And if that means I'm out for the day, I'm in bed for the day, then that's okay too, right? It's all about how you can take care of yourself. And I also think that our episode with Chris Burrus really was wonderful. And I have to say, that's one of my probably top 3 episodes.
Yeah, Chris is pretty high up there for me too. Like I really loved, first of all, I loved Chris just generally. Like I understand why he's a therapist, right? Like if I didn't have my own, I would easily see myself going to Chris for therapy because his manner is so easy and calming, right? Like his manner is very like, sure, I can tell you all of my life story, Chris.
Right. Yeah. And you know he's not going to judge. Right. It's just everything's so calm and yet he has a great sense of humor as well. And we just really unpacked so much in that episode with him. And even some stuff with
we cut out. Yeah, we cut out some stuff. Even some stuff between the two of us that we cut out, which was great, So I am excited because I know we're thinking about having Chris back on and really like figuring out a way how we can kind of have him back on that speaks to like what we're talking about right now in our episodes.
Yeah.
But Chris is definitely one of those people who I would see coming back. But he really talked a lot about how we criticize ourselves and what our mind does and what our parts do and how they work. And that whole IFS concept, which I know you do a lot of work with, is so fascinating to me. I know I was telling you about a coaching client I have where where I didn't know what the heck I was talking about. But she said something to me and I'm like, well, how do you think that part feels? And I was like, oh, I hear Liz in my head right now.
That is so funny. My God. Yeah, because the IFS model is actually very quite simple.
Yeah.
And, it's short, of course, for internal family systems. And if anyone's really interested in learning more about that, listen to Chris's episode.
And yours too.
Taming the Inner Critic. And I was going to say, and mine too, on mindfulness. And I feel like, at least for me, when I'm struggling or I'm being triggered or I'm in the kind of thick of some really hard stuff around my company, say if I'm losing money or I'm coming up right now to holiday season, and with COVID, it's a very different season for bar candy,
Yeah.
right? And so some of this, financial stuff around that I've always really enjoyed every holiday season, that's not going to be the same. And so what I like to do is really kind of use that IFS model to go inside and say, okay, so how can I deal with this with using what they call my self-led energy, right? How can I have some compassion for myself in this situation? How can I stay connected to myself? How can I keep my curiosity level high and not have that sort of numb? And how can I, really look at my situation as this isn't a forever thing.
Yeah.
This is a for now thing.
Temporary. Yeah.
And, and then also noticing that there could be some traumatized exiled parts, which is our inner kind of stories that we have as kids. And how does this relate back to, say, my past and where I came from? And sometimes just soothing that part of me and just saying, you know what, this isn't the same as back when I was, I don't know,
yeah,
8 years old, 9 years old. It's very different.
Yeah.
And that's why I'm such a massive fan of the IFS model, because it really is like a really quick way to really kind of balance yourself out and get back to your self-led energy.
Yeah.
And I'm a huge fan. I use it in my coaching, and I will become a practitioner in 2021.
Yeah.
So perhaps we'll have another discussion about that at that time. I don't want to use up all of our
chat.
talk about this forever, but definitely Chris's episode was
really
one of my top three.
One of my top three for sure. Yeah. And in terms of one that really I've been thinking about ever since we've had it, there's two in particular. So the episode we did with Dr. Terry about the future of work. So work is my jam, right? Like that how people work, what people do. So she said something very specific in that episode about how we really ought to move away from this idea of working for one employer, right? And and that really resonated with me because I could already see that happening, right? Like I could see that happening in the world of work. I mean, we think about people just saying, oh, I'm just going to have a side hustle, right? And I'm going to start making money in these ways. But long gone are the days where people could work for one employer for 30, 40 years. That had stopped happening for a really, really long time. But I think it's getting worse in the sense that we're now having people who barely can make a living with one employer. So you have to have other things, and that's why they're gig workers. They're driving Uber at night and they're doing all these things. But it's also sort of the hollowing out. I used to call it the hollowing out of the middle, but what she used, the image she used, was the idea of an hourglass and tightening a belt around the middle.
Yes.
Which was what was, whew, I love that
Brilliant.
imagery. Yeah, brilliant imagery. And that is so true to me, because the middle is missing, right?
Yeah.
And to me, the middle is where work gets done. Right? So you're either having this low level workers, right? Computers are filling out the middle in my mind. And then if you're not strategic and you don't understand how to run things from a strategic level, that's how you get to stay in the top part of the hourglass, right? But sometimes every time you tighten that belt, when there's a recession, like what's going on right now, you drop down. Mm-hmm. And there's no way to get back up. And I'm like, if people really sort of thought about their careers in that way, you know, it really makes sense that so many people are now becoming entrepreneurs because of this whole phenomenon. This whole phenomenon of work. I loved that conversation. It just sat with me for days, and I still think about it all the time.
Yeah, I loved it too. Dr. Terry was like a supreme badass.
Oh my God, love her.
Yeah, she went back to school. I think she was 45 or 50 when she went back for her master's degree.
Yes.
And she's a doctor now.
PhD,
and
I think she said.
I learned so much from her. Yeah, and she had some really great strategies and tools to really kind of hone in on that, and really, as you say, look at that big picture, because a lot of people are not doing that.
Right.
And it's so important to do that and plan out your future. And of course, that's her specialty, is the future of business, of work. So yeah, I agree. She was fantastic. What was a favorite episode of yours that we did together?
I liked failure.
We did a couple of.
Well, I like all of our episodes. Because I think that that's an opportunity for you and I just to chat, and for the audience to get an insight to some of the conversations we have that aren't recorded. We generally kind of keep it together and keep it professional when we are recording. But one, we crack each other up, which I absolutely love. And you know, we tend to have very insightful conversations, which is part of what I wanted to capture in the podcast, which is why I love when we do those. So I generally like all of them, like just as a general rule.
We're such nerds. We're such narcissists. It's like, I remember when we
were my voice, Uber. Liz.
I remember when we were in an Uber, and you and I, we just, we hadn't really known each other for too long, but we already knew we were going to do the podcast together. And so we're chatting in the back of the Uber, and we're joking around. We're just talking about all these great, deep things. And you're like, oh, shh, quiet. We have to wait. We have to
like keep all this stuff bottled up.
Yeah. It's so good.
Yeah.
But yeah, you're right. And having all of our guests, as amazing as it is, and I just love it so much, it's getting back to, our chemistry and the kind of things that we feel like we're kind of experts in, and stuff we want to share with our audience.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, I love our episodes as well, which is why I kind of like the flow that we've gotten into, where we'll do our guests, but we'll do an episode like this where we're chatting with each other, and we're getting our thoughts out there as well, because that's kind of the point as well, where, it's about us too.
It's about us too, darn it. My favorite episode that we did together is What We Wish We Knew Before Becoming Entrepreneurs. Yeah. And I just listened to that one the other day because I knew that we were going to record this today. So I kind of wanted to get caught up. Yeah. And I laughed so hard throughout that episode. I know. I thought it was so funny. And I thought, there's so much that all of us, and, I'm sure all of our listeners who are entrepreneurs, there's so many things and mistakes that we all make. And that's okay, because mistakes, we learn from them and we move on. And just because we make some mistakes, I know I've made a ton of mistakes, and, kind of serious ones. And that's okay, right?
Mhm.
Just get back on the horse and keep going.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. I
and it's,
think if you're going to force me to pick one, I would pick the very first one that we recorded. Absolutely. The tester one that we decided to record.
oh, I
Yeah,
like
I
that one
loved that
too.
conversation a lot. And even though
What
it
did
was,
you like about that conversation?
well, it's a very interesting thing, right? So I think it's happening at levels, because first, on the first level, it was a tester. So it was still at the time when we were kind of thinking, are we going to do something together or not? I knew I wanted to kind of do a podcast, and I asked you to join as a way to sort of get my feet wet in this whole
Right.
podcasting thing, right? So we didn't know a lot about each other, and we were really kind of telling some of those stories and how we got started and where we got started. And then what I liked is in the middle of it, because I was supposed to be interviewing you, you turned it around on me, and we started, like, you interviewed me, and I was like, oh yeah, this is my person. This is my person. Right. And so that just kind of holds a very special place in my heart, because it was the beginning of this venture that we're doing together. It really kind of confirmed for me that this was the right thing for us to be doing. And you know, and that it needed to be with you, and really sort of worked with us, building and developing a partnership, which is something we've never really talked about in terms of just having a partnership. And there's so many nuances to being in a partnership with somebody, which I think is worthwhile for an episode at some point. Right.
You are absolutely 100% right. My husband even said, he said, you know what, you guys need to record an episode about partnerships.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
you know what that entails, because there's not, at least from my perspective, there's not a lot that I've heard about just, you know, the dynamics of a partnership and how that unfolds. And like you said, like you and I did not know each other when we first started. I mean, we met at NYU and we liked each other, and we thought, oh, hey, this be kind of cool. Let's see what happens. And then as things started becoming more serious in terms of, we could see we really have something good here.
Yeah.
We had to start kind of buckling down, and I think our emotions kind of, you know, got in there.
So maybe we talk about partnership with Chris.
Yes, great idea.
And bring him back, because he's a marriage therapist as well, so he gets the whole
so he
dynamic.
gets the whole thing.
Yeah. But yeah, and then, you know, we're both independent people as well, right? So, and very used to, because we have our own business that's separate to what we're doing here with BBB. We are in control of our own domains. So there's so many things that come into like trying to build a partnership as well. So yeah. So
and you know, it's funny because I have this written down in my notes as something I wanted to touch on today is our partnership. Yeah. And you know, one thing I do want to say that I'm grateful for is, you know, even though we've kind of butt heads a couple times, because we're gonna have different ideas and different opinions, you know, as any partnership does and should, right? If both people think the same way, it's going to be really boring.
Well, it's going to be boring, and I don't want to talk to you.
right. And then we both think the same way, and then it's so boring.
Yeah.
So, but what I'm grateful for is because both of us, I think, are pretty good at communicating how we feel.
Yes.
We're able to, and we've been through a shit ton of therapy throughout the years, that I think we're both able to kind of get it out and then go, okay, I see your side. Okay, I see your side. Okay, let's find
a place to be in the middle. Yeah, and it's really working through,
which is nice.
Yeah, each other's communication style and how we, you know, because I can be hyperbolic, and I realize that it's something that I generally just kind of need to work on anyway, because I can be hyperbolic and very big picture. And sometimes people are like in the weeds, and I'm like, why are you in the weeds? Like, get out of the weeds. I'm up here in the sky. Come on. Right. And like recognizing that, oh yeah, you know what? We're in the weeds. Let's do weeds for now.
Right. Let's do weeds. And you know, that's one of my favorite things too, is you know, you have to walk through it always. And it's the gucky walking through it that nobody likes.
Nobody wants to do that, but
whether it's in friendships, partnerships, marriages, whatever, it's all the same crap, right? You always have to walk through that muck to get to the other side. And if you don't, there's going to be huge problems down the road.
Yeah, no, I absolutely love it. So we'll make a note that we're going to talk about partnerships with Chris.
Yes. Yes.
And then you guys can wait for that.
Right, right. And there's one thing that I wanted to just mention too, because I know we're kind of starting to get to the end of our time pretty soon, is we didn't talk about Greg Faxon, but just, in terms of what Greg had to say, and I'm looking down here at my notes, I wrote down in like big letters, deliberate practice, when he talks about you have to have a deliberate practice every day, especially in particularly as an entrepreneur. And, what I do is I always try and kind of balance out my body, mind, spirit. And I know he talks about that quite a bit as well, even in running your business. And he always says, if one of these parts isn't really working well, then it's kind of going to all crumble down. And I believe that to be true as well. And that's why I'm glad with our podcast, I'm happy that we touch on, I feel like, all 3 points, more so about the entrepreneurial stuff and business tips and tools. People want to tune in, they want to learn. But also it's important for all of us to know is that without the other 2, the spirit and the physical body being healthy, it's a missing link. And we won't operate as well as entrepreneurs.
Yeah, we have to think about all the things that go into us being our very best selves. And I know a lot of times when we say our best selves, we're thinking about that from a very personal development-y type place. And that is true, but it also means what's your physical like, right? And how does your spirit feel? Because all those things impact you. And even from a very basic thing, I mean, my bachelor's degree is in organizational behavior. But when we talk about organizational behavior, the first section of that talks about individuals. And we talk about emotions, mood, and your personality. And that's where we start, right? Before we even get to the larger stuff about culture. Like that's where the lessons start. You start with the individual. So the individual matters, whatever you're doing, whether you're working by yourself or you are working and you've got a bunch of people working for you, whatever you're doing, it starts with self, right?
Yes, you're right. It starts with self. And he talks about, if we don't have that in place, then, we're kind of maybe get out of the gates as an entrepreneur. We might, have a website or create a logo, but eventually we're just gonna crumble. And I mean, what you probably know this better than I do. What percentage of businesses fail? Was it 80% in the first 5 or 10 years?
It's a high number. I see a different number every time. I think last night I was reading something that said 90%. But the bottom line is it's a high number that businesses fail, whether within the first year or the first 5 years, right? That they fail. And I know from my own personal experience, I could call my business a failure at some point when I decided, okay, this is too hard. I'm going to go get a job, right? And taking that opportunity to go get a job because it was hard for me to make sales and figure out how to do that part. So, really working on yourself, which is, again, the mission of our podcast, really finding the way to give you the practical stuff, but also find a way to give you the stuff that helps you figure out how you keep going on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah. I love that. I love that. That's so true, right?
Yeah.
And I like to tell people when they're like, oh, what's your podcast about? I say, well, it's practical tips and tools and with a dose of depth. And it's inspirational as well. But there's one thing that I think kind of sets us apart from some of the other podcasts which talk about businesses and entrepreneurship is we like to have fun here at BB&B.
Yes.
We like to laugh and we like to have fun.
Yes.
And we like to joke around and we like to make fun of ourselves.
Yeah.
So I think that, at least for me, I really love doing this podcast.
I do too. I do too.
Awesome. It's awesome. And I'm so glad that that is catching on and people are listening. And we
I
have some, it's like, I'm like, oh my God, I can't even believe this is happening.
I know.
It's so great.
It's so great. It's so good. And I'm so excited. And I am very happy that I'm doing it with you. It's so awesome. It's so cool.
Oh,
So
thank
fun.
you. I'm very happy I'm doing it with you too.
Yeah. And for the people who might be looking at us on YouTube, I mean, this Love Fest is not like that all the time. I just want everybody to know.
Right. If you could have heard us a couple of weeks
A
ago,
couple of weeks ago.
a
couple of weeks
you
ago.
wouldn't be saying it. That's great. So, all right.
I think it's a great place to end.
It's a great place to end. Yeah.
All
So
right.
looking forward to seeing everybody with this new, I mean, we're on
This
YouTube
thing we're
now.
doing. Oh my God.
All right. So
All
next
right.
time we are going to, we usually say thanks for being a badass. Lisa, just, thanks generally for being a badass.
Yeah, you too. Thank you for being my favorite badass. Bye, guys.
Right.
We'll see you
Bye,
next time.
guys.